Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Change Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a very interesting topic, and I'm so excited to introduce the speaker today. Her name is Gillian Riley. She's the author of 5 books, and she is coming in from the UK, and she's an expert on curbing addiction. She's also a TEDx speaker. I'll link the link to her TEDx talk in the description below. And she is especially an expert in food and nicotine addiction. Hi, Jillian.
Hello, Linda.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to be here. I'm really excited.
I'm so excited about this topic because I think a lot of people can relate and learn so much about food and nicotine addiction from this podcast. So I'm curious, Jillian, what is your story? What got you to be an expert on food and nicotine addiction?
Well, I am an ex-smoker and an ex-overeater. I suppose the way to describe that is I'm currently about 3 dress sizes smaller than I was at my largest.
Nice.
But more importantly, I'm considerably healthier now. I'm as healthy as I could be. I'm not on medication. There's nothing wrong with me as far as I know. Contrasted against really not being well at all for long periods of time especially my 30s. And that was very much connected with what I was eating. Anyway, I ran a stop smoking course in London, which is where I'm from, for about 15 years. And I really loved doing that. But as time went on, I stayed in contact with my clients after they stopped smoking. And many of the conversations I had with them became about food. So it's very common for people to stop smoking and then eat where they would have had a cigarette, like at the end of a meal or in between meals. And that's where an awful lot of the weight gain is. It's very commonly associated with people stopping smoking. So I got involved in that. But I've been teaching and counseling and writing about these 2 subjects for about 30 years. So I think that counts as the famous 10,000 hours that you're supposed to put in to become an expert.
Yes.
So I've definitely done 10,000 hours, definitely. I ran groups on how to stop smoking. I'm taking control of overeating for the last 20 years in London and for the last 2 years online.
Do you think that we as a society are addicted to food? Even around me, I see a lot of people who turn to food for emotional support or turn to just eating, consuming. And you see, especially in the US, there's a big population of obesity. 1/3 of every US American adult is obese. And, a lot of people say that has to do with processed food and the junk food that is available to us now. But I believe that there's something internal about us, maybe some kind of inherent trait that was passed down from generation to generation. But do you think that we as a society are addicted to food? And if yes, how did we get here?
I think that there is an inherent tendency because we came from ancestors who lived in an environment of food scarcity. And so our biology, our biochemistry, but especially our brain function, which is sort of the seat and the control panel of everything, is suited to overeating, to finding food and wanting food at every opportunity. And way back when, and it wasn't that long ago, but a few generations ago, for the overwhelming majority of human history, there hasn't been that much food around. And long periods of, or at least significant periods of famine, food not being available. But then the other thing is that when we did find food, it wasn't all that interesting. We would go foraging and find, a cabbage or something, and that was like a big day for us. And especially, it's getting more and more and more, but especially since really the 60s, 70s, 80s, the food industry has become highly skilled at making the most attractive, exciting, drug-like items. And we're drawn to them, even things that we regard as, dinner. I mean, I'm not just talking about, candies and ice cream, but all kinds of food that's packaged and sold. It needs to have an addictive quality to it, otherwise it won't sell. And that's how they stay in business.
I heard that the secret formula for the food industry to get people addicted to stuff is fat, salt, and crunch.
I think the crunch would be the carbohydrate content. Yeah. I mean, they've brought it down to a fine art, and it's available. There's nothing seasonal about it. We've got it all the time. And then the culture has supported that by normalizing it. Yep. So it's not unusual to go and have a snack in the middle of the afternoon. People don't think anything of it. Like, why not?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that about how society made that normal, because I know kids who grow up thinking that frozen dinners are healthy. Especially if it's low calorie, if it's packaged as low calorie, organic, non-GMO, it has all the right labels, but still frozen food. We have kids growing up thinking that it's healthy, and they're getting their vegetables and they're getting their meat, but it's not the same nutritional content as raw, natural food.
Well, I'm even thinking of just the processing, the added sugar and things like that, and that very often we don't even realize there's added sugar in things, and that makes it more attractive. But it also makes it, I mean, ultimately not very good for our health, and of course our waistlines too. But it's the point is that it makes it more compelling. It's more, as I say, drug-like. We are attracted to it. Most people, certainly most people I see, most people who come to me for help, if they're in a restaurant and they're looking at a menu thinking, shall I have a salad or shall I have a pizza? They go, well, pizza, of course, because that's the more, as you say, it's got the fat, it's got the salt, and it's got the crunch. Mm-hmm. It's a more attractive, a more desirable item. So the question is, how do you eat less pizza and more salad? And why would you in the first place? And that's what I'm most interested in.
So that's a really good question. So how can we, when we have the choices between a pizza and a salad, how can I get myself to choose the salad instead of the pizza?
Well, I spend a lot of time in my books and my online course attempting to answer that. I think that, it's been shown in the brain scanning, the research that uses the fMRI brain scan. It's been shown that the more addictive, what they call highly palatable food, the more attractive food, lights the brain up in the same way that a drug would. And so they have comparisons of perhaps people who say are addicted to cocaine, and they put them in the brain scans and show them images of people doing cocaine, and it induces a desire, a craving in them. And then the same thing for people who overeat, and they see pictures of people eating their favorite food, and the craving state is quite similar. It's not identical, but there is a lot that's similar, and particularly that initial burst of dopamine that keeps us focused on that food. So I think a first step is understanding that there is a biochemistry there, there is a brain mechanism there that um, is quite automatic and kind of triggers us into making those more addictive choices. And I think, first of all, understanding that reality, but then understanding that the more we act on it, the more it's going to be there, and vice versa. The less we act on it, the more it's going to fade. So, taking pizza as an example, I can tell you absolutely there was a time when I ate pizza at least once a week, and I don't eat it at all now. And I don't miss it. In fact, the only time I ever think about it is when I'm talking about it to clients like this. I don't feel deprived of pizza, and I think that's really where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that if I understand this correctly, is there a part of the brain that craves things? And then whether it's food, whether it's nicotine, whether it's anything that you can be addicted to, drugs, it fires the same region of the brain, which is why we get addicted to that thing in the first place. So it's not about the thing, it's about where it stimulates in the brain.
Yes. And it's learned. The part of the brain, it's called different things, but sometimes it's called the limbic system. It's the midbrain. And if you took a line back from your eyes and in from your ears, where that met in the middle, that's where it would be. Sometimes referred to as the striatum. That's where the dopamine is released from. And it's learned behavior. Like Pavlov's dogs. Pavlov taught his dogs to salivate just when they heard a bell. That was it. They heard a bell and they salivated because they were expecting food. So dogs don't normally salivate when they hear bells, but that was, he just trained them because he always rang this bell when he gave them food. So the thing is, I walk past the pizza place now and I'm not salivating or craving or wanting, like that, because I've taught myself that particular cue, which is walking past that pizza place, doesn't activate for me. So it's learned behavior. Sorry, that wasn't very good English, but do you see what I'm saying? Yes. You learn it and you can unlearn it. So that's the point. So the trigger is there already inherent in the brain because we needed that trigger for our survival. It's just, the brain hasn't, that part of the brain hasn't updated and learned that, pizza isn't actually supporting our survival. The salad is.
I think the fact that you said that habits can be learned and unlearned is very helpful for people listening in, because I know a lot of people who suffer from food addiction, they feel like they're kind of a helpless victim to this craving. I know a lot of girls, a lot of my friends who try to stop their food addiction, stop relying on food for emotional support, but it's very difficult, especially if you rely on it to satisfy something inside that makes you empty.
The thing is that an emotional state, like feeling, I'm not enough, or my life isn't working like it's supposed to work, or, I hate my job, like any of those sorts of thoughts and feelings, they can be triggers. So if every time I feel hopeless about my life, I do a line of cocaine, then that feeling is going to elicit a craving for cocaine. But if every time I feel hopeless about my life, I eat something, especially if it's kind of, gooey, sugary, highly charged kind of food, because usually people don't, their first thought isn't, celery and cucumber.
Right. No angry
Um,
person reaches for a celery.
yeah, for emotional eating.
Right.
So then that becomes the learned behavior. And the feeling of, my job is awful, I hate my life, or, whatever version of that it is, that becomes the ringing bell to the Pavlov's dogs. So again, that can be unlearned. Now, so it can be disassociated just the same as it was learned in the first place.
Yeah, I really like that. That gives me a lot of hope for people who are addicted to food and they feel helpless. So I know, Jillian, that you're a big, big proponent of eating less. And I've read many different books about different, not really diets, but like lifestyle changes of eating less. And, in my head, it makes sense that eating less would be better for us. But can you tell us exactly how eating less benefits our bodies?
Well, the first thing is that I am speaking to people mostly, I mean, I am really exclusively speaking to people who overeat. And I think that's important. I'm not promoting like anorexia. So for people who overeat, like, they just don't stop eating. They're eating meals that by their own definition are too large, and then they're snacking and they don't really stop. The main problem, no matter what they're eating, and of course there's the quality issue as well, like how much is really good, serious, like what I call proper food. But what is mostly the problem is that our bodies are always in a digestion mode. It can take, some people say 18, 20, even longer than 20 hours to fully, completely digest what we've eaten, whatever it is. And so most people never stop doing that. Their bodies are continually digesting and metabolizing the food that they've eaten, probably half an hour ago or even like an hour ago. So it, from the work on longevity and health, there's an awful lot of people who are saying now that it's a very, very good idea to give our bodies a rest, and particularly overnight, so that if, say, we ate our last, meal or snack earlier in the evening and then had the whole night without food, obviously we're sleeping, our bodies can detoxify and repair and rejuvenate, which is what our bodies do while we're asleep, and then even carry on into the morning without eating. That having that length of time, so that the body can turn to other things other than digesting food. It's a very, very good idea. Awful lot of people are saying that. No matter what style of eating, whether people are, eating raw or vegan or, not veg, whatever it is, the style of food.
I really like that because yeah, a lot of people don't realize that your internal organs, your intestines especially, they're muscles that constantly, if you keep eating, they constantly have to create peristalsis all the time like this.
Mm-hmm.
And like any other muscle, imagine having to move your arms like this for 24 hours. Your arms are going to get sore and you're going to be tired. But we don't realize that that's what we're doing to our digestive system. So like you said, when we give them a break, it gives them a chance to repair themselves so that they can work optimally instead of being worn out, constantly moving this way.
Yes, and there's the digestion process once the food has got inside our bodies, not even what we think of digestion, but like the liver is still in that process of digesting. So, it's all the most demanding work we ever ask our bodies to do.
Yeah, and there's so much blood and lymph nodes, everything. They say
Yeah,
the gut is the holy grail of your body, that
yeah,
the real command central of your body, and
yeah.
we take it for granted. I feel we abuse our intestines and organs all the time with the food that we eat. Yeah. So, Jillian, if people wanted to know more about what you do, especially you said you do coaching and you do classes for people who have food addiction problems, or if
Mm.
someone has a nicotine problem and they need help, how can people get connected to you?
Well, possibly to get an idea of the work that I do, is this little book called Ditching Diets is a very good introduction and something that can be read in a couple of evenings. And that's available on Amazon in ebook form as well as this paperback old-fashioned book that I've got
I'll,
here.
I'll put a link to her book in the YouTube description below as well for people who are interested.
That's a very good overview, but I've also got my main website, Eating Less Online, and all the information is there. I'm offering a series of 6 uh, sessions that make up the program and the entire course.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been amazing and really quite extraordinary putting all that together.
And I really love that, you are someone who used to struggle from food addiction, used to struggle from nicotine addiction, and you're someone who overcame it. And through your experience and through your knowledge, you're helping other people who are going through the same thing. So I feel like the best people to receive help from are people who walked in your shoes, who know what you're going through. So if you're facing food addiction, if you're facing nicotine addiction, and you would love some help, please reach out to Jillian. I'll link all of her information down in the description below. Her TED Talk that she did that I saw and I connected with her through her TED Talk, her website, and also her book down in the descriptions. So any
Thank
last
you.
words?
Thank
Of
you.
course. Any last words for our audience, Jillian, before we close out this podcast?
You know, I think the big misunderstanding with addiction is people think if I admit that I'm addicted, then the only thing I can do to sort that out is to abstain.
Mm,
Of course, abstaining from food entirely is not a good idea, but people try to become too rigid in the sense of abstaining completely from, say, sugar, for example. And in fact, when you look at it, there's an awful lot, an awful lot, but a number of addictive behaviors where abstinence isn't the solution. And that, I think, is a incredibly important and even liberating and exciting concept, is that it's about eating less sugar, eating less, carbohydrate, eating less, in between meals, rather than not at all.
mhm. I really like that because everything in moderation. We have a tendency to go extreme one way or extreme the other way. And that's how we yo yo back and forth and we don't find balance. But I love what you just said. That's all about finding balance. It's not about cutting something off cold turkey, but learning how to reduce the bad habit and increase the good habit so that you find a balance that works for you.
Being able to live with it in the long term.
Yes. Yeah, you're right, because that balance is what's sustainable and will keep you running the marathon for a long time, not just a short sprint.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I learned a lot about food addiction, especially because a lot of people now go through some type of food addiction or some type of addiction. So I
Mm,
hope that the content that she shared here was valuable for our audience. I had an amazing time. Thank you so much, Jillian.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. See you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.